So I'm going to begin because I don't want anything to hold up our very exciting discussion that's going to unfold soon. Just for the record, I want to say that I am Tejaswini Niranjana from Ahmedabad University, Center for Interasian Research. I'm the moderator of this program and the overall curator of Saath Saath, which is an India-China collaboration that has been going through different iterations, beginning with music and now working with food. With me are the doctors, Dr. Chang Chi Han from Traditional Chinese Medicine, TCM, Dr. Nitya Sivan from Ayurvedic Medicine, and Edible Archives, Shalini and Anumitra, who are the anchors and co-conceptualizers of this entire project. So last time we spoke about the question of 5 elements, both in TCM and Ayurveda. We tried to look at how the elements help us to understand health as well as illness. We looked at the question of how a good digestive system, talking about food and lungs would go together. We focused primarily on the question of taste in relation to the elements. And we looked at how the different combinations work out in, say, Chinese cooking and also in Ayurveda. We did go through the question of the doshas and how they connect to the elements. But I do urge you to watch the first video in the series, and the elaborate details of the discussion will become clear to you. So I'd like to begin today's session, which will move forward in the discussion and focus much more clearly on food. But Dr. Chan wanted me to share the story, which resonates with what we discussed in the first session. This is the story. I'll try to be brief. He says the best doctor works with healthy people. Once upon a time, there were 3 brothers who were both doctors, who were all doctors. The youngest of the 3 was famous for being a miracle doctor. When a patient asked him about the 2 brothers, he said, "My second brother is actually better than me, and my elder brother has even better skill." So the patient was very curious and said, "They don't have many patients, and you have quite a few. Why would you say that?" The doctor said, "The best doctor works with the healthy. A good doctor checks the diseases, and a mediocre doctor cures those who are sick. I treat people with serious illnesses, so patients think I'm good. Like governing a state, it is too late when after chaos has occurred. My second brother is a good doctor, as he cured the patient quickly when the diseases are still in their early stage. My eldest brother, on the other hand, has full awareness and understanding of his patients and cures the disease before it even starts. This is the best form of medical practice." This is used in Chinese society to describe the importance of health care, keeping warm when it is cold, for example. But Dr. Chan says maybe the best medicine is to understand the body's response to every environment and mood, down to the smallest changes in time and space, how the body processes or retracts in the future, and come up accordingly with tactics of resolution, interception, enhancement, and balancing, as if it is about coordination in a battle. To achieve this, we must master all the interactions between the human organic body and the universe, the yang or the understanding, the evolutionary trajectory of how humans and non-humans collect and preserve energy, something that works like the rule of gravity, Tao, and use appropriate methods to create balance. That's yin or practice. This is how medicine should be. I just want to say here that we were all delighted to hear the story. And once again, it, I think, reinforces our sense, our belief that there is so much resemblance between Indian medicine and Chinese medicine. So now over to Edible Archives to ask the first question.
Shalini from Edible Archives. I'll go straight into the questions after this introduction by Dr. Tejaswini. We started, the first question gives a metaphor that our fight against disease is also usually a story. So many metaphors are used to describe this kind of a fight. Allopathic medicine generally imagines something like a war, when there's an army of soldiers, chemical weapons, red blood cells. All of these things are the defending army, and they are eradicating and invading a corresponding army of viruses or pathogens. That is one metaphor. But other traditions imagine the body as a landscape or a garden, an ecosystem, if you want to think of it that way, which then requires a lot of careful tending by gardeners, as well as other things like sunlight, water, fertilizer, etc. And any problem that the body faces is caused by an imbalance in these aspects. Too much sun, not enough water, the wrong thing being cut down at the wrong time, that kind of thing. So if we follow this metaphor, the body as a landscape or a garden gets its nutrition through the food that we eat, right? As opposed to fertilizer, etc. So in that case, like different plants or different ecosystems, do different bodies need different types of nutrition? I'm posing this question to both the doctors.
Dr. Chan, would you like to respond first?
Okay. So good morning, everyone. 頭先嗰個問題咧，我會由我一個 recipe 開始嘅。呢個 recipe 咧就叫做紅豆薏米。呢個係好少個 recipe 咧，我係可以話到俾病人聽咧，佢係365日都飲得嘅，可以食可以飲嘅。事實上咧，中醫其實全部好着重相對性嘅。所有嘅毒藥可以攞嚟醫病啦，所有好嘅藥材，包括我哋好 popular 嘅人參咧，其實就可以殺人嘅，即係對個身體有好大嘅傷害。所以呢一個好特別嘅方咧，我哋解構一下點解佢可以每一日都食。如果大家記得嗰個圖咧，即係上次五行嗰個圖咧，咁我哋會睇到一樣嘢，中醫好着重腸胃嘅，即係消化系統。呢一個湯基本上係水啦嚇，兩樣嘢煲埋嘅水咧，其實係對嗰個腸胃有好大嘅好處。咁紅豆我哋話有強心嘅作用，咁所以加起嚟咧就係火生土。我簡單用咗呢一個例子咧，其實去説明有一個 universal benefit 嘅食物咧係好少嘅。以下咧我就會分享一本書，佢就好似食物界裏面嘅聖經咁樣嘅。對中醫嚟講係古代食物嘅聖經。呢本書嘅特別之處咧，佢就分開咗3個種類，3個 categories。咁我都傳咗俾阿 Kevin 頭先啱。咁佢就係有上品、中品同埋下品。佢分別代表咗咧，其實可用性就係上品。如果我哋睇翻咧，上品就係久服新興，可以成為神仙。咁當然即係呢一個係講笑啦。如果喺我哋現代嘅理解嚟講咧，成仙嘅意思咧就係佢好快樂嘅，佢係好無憂無慮嘅，就唔會因為個病會影響到。中品同下品咧分別就係我哋可以偶然食啦。下品嘅意思多數咧就當我哋喺病或者重病嘅時候先服用嘅。但係我哋而家個現代社會好有趣，我哋用嘅好多藥咧都係屬於下品或者中品嘅。我有一樣嘢補充咧，就係我哋而家主要係講緊食物啊嘛。咁但係中醫咧叫做藥食同源，就係源頭嗰個源。所以有興趣咧喺阿 Kevin 嗰個 attachment 咧就可以有好多圖片啦，我哋可以研究一下即係今日嗰個飲食習慣同埋古時嘅藥或者叫做食物有啲咩共通或者唔同嘅地方。喺呢一度咧，最後有一點我想提下咧，我發現咗個好有趣嘅道理，就係上品我哋喺上品嗰度咧發現到喺現代醫學入邊咧講嘅一啲毒藥。所以我嗰個諗法就係點解會有毒嘅藥物喺上品，但係又嗰個聖經就會叫人日日食嘅咧？我有2個諗法。第一個咧就係佢哋個名咧，即係品種嘅名咧，其實係同現代嘅名係一樣， 但係其實佢係唔同嘅物質。第二個諗法就更加有趣嘅，因為呢個咧就係關於地區同埋劑量嘅問題。中國地區咧喺古時嘅流動性好低，咁所以一般人咧都會喺一個地區嗰度生活，所以佢哋個體質都會係固定。我哋用翻嗰個圖去解釋咧，就係每一個地區就會用一啲特別嘅藥、獨特嘅藥去平衡身體，令到個人身體健康。所以以現代一句講法去總結咧，就係一個讀學嘅專家會同我哋講一句説話，叫做 dosage is the king。即係咪毒藥咧？其實佢個血就在於佢嘅 dosage 同埋用得啱唔啱。
So I just want to repeat part of the question that Shalini was asking. I think we are also curious that do you treat every patient in the same way? I think we know the answer is no, but what are the criteria by which you distinguish between patients? And I think Shalini was asking, doesn't depend on the body, also the gender of the body, the way in which the age of the body may be, because you, Dr. Chan, you spoke about location and someone who's been in one place without much mobility. But can you also tell us today in this globalized world, when you treat people, how do you keep in mind their age, the kind of body, etc.? Is that also connected to the dosage question? Is there some food that anyone can take, no matter who they are or which culture they come from? I think that was also what we are trying to ask.
答嗰個問題咧，第一個係肯定100%唔係嘅。如果我嘅 practice 咧，就我嘅習慣就係用先將即係病人嘅病情擺落嗰個五行嘅圖嗰度睇一次，再將佢個生理再擺落個圖嗰度睇一次，做一個兩次嘅掃描咯。中醫有兩句説話可以即係反映到頭先嗰個問題嘅部分答案就係異病同治。異病同治同埋同病異治，異就係異性嘅異，即是話咧唔同嘅病咧，我哋可以用同一個藥方去處理。同病異治咧就係我哋同一個病，譬如感冒都好咧，我哋都會中醫會用大相徑庭嘅藥方，好唔同嘅藥方去處理。中間嗰個聯繫咧係好緊要嘅。呢個就係我講嘅氣同埋個道，即係話個五行嘅相生相克嘅專業。所以有啲中醫會用感冒藥去醫癌症嘅。最尾一個問題嘅答案咧就係、我哋會從個味道。Taju 頭先就問會唔會有啲食物係可以每個人都食啦？咁中醫傾向咧就講個味道淡嘅，同埋對腸胃嗰個消化系統好嘅食物，我哋就可以比較容易跌入呢一個category 入邊。個原因好容易去理解，用翻五行個圖就係、當我哋有味道嘅時候咧，越重味咧，我哋就會干擾到身體嘅氣同埋血嘅運行，因為五行係有方向，咁所以亦都容易引起身體嘅變化。間接講就係不適啦。咁如果越淡味嘅東西咧，咁就會造成個干擾就會相對少啲，咁服用嘅時間就可以長啲啦。所以醫生都係即係沉迷喺一啲好重味嘅藥嗰度，因為醫生都係睇緊病，同埋佢哋最 fancy 嘅就係醫病啦。
I think these are very fascinating answers, and there is a lot of ground that's been covered. So I'm not sure we can do exactly the same kind of mapping for Ayurveda, but Nitya is a very competent doctor. And I think that the questions are so similar, she would have many answers for this as well. So may I request Nitya now to address the question?
Sorry, just
yes.
1 second. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things from what Dr. Chan said. One is if we can have the name at some point of the text, the one that you said is like a Bible for ancient food. that categorizes higher, mid, and lower ranking things. Then the second thing that I didn't quite understand is that you said that doctors focus on stronger tasting medicines, but food that is milder tasting is better for the person. So that seems like a bit of a contradiction. Before that, you said that foods that have a milder taste are better for because the mild taste doesn't impede the flow of energy. But then the medicines that doctors give are stronger tasting. So why, like, these two things contradict each other?
嗰個係一個現象，亦都係一個開玩笑嘅，因為即係醫生直頭係好 fancy 一啲重味嘅嘢，例如如果喺香港有隻叫安宮牛黃丸啊嘛，咁嗰個係下品嚟嘅，即係有毒嘅。咁但係而家就係用最貴嘅價錢去賣，咁因為佢醫到一啲好重嘅心臟病，咁所以我頭先即係有少少係開玩笑嘅性質。醫生都係沉迷喺嗰個重味嘅嘢。我哋之前講嘅五行圖咧，其實內容非常豐富，佢會講緊一個人嘅身體同埋四季啦，佢自己個體質啦，患者嘅情緒啦，同埋好多嘢嘅互動。所以要回答個問題咧，我哋要翻去嗰個圖嗰度，咁去了解嗰種動態。我之後會舉一個例子。香港係一個大城市啦，咁個人嘅精神壓力好大，所以佢哋對食物嘅要求咧係傾向好濃味同埋好刺激性。但係如果香港去到一個好寧靜同埋風景好好嘅鄉郊嘅地方去旅行咧，佢哋嘅味道亦都會隨之而變，可能會更加識欣賞一啲當地嘅，即係比較淡味嘅食物。魚生就係一個例子咯。所以香港人去日本食魚生，咁魚生本身就係一個鹹味嘅食物啦，但係都屬於唔算係一個濃味，係屬於淡少少嘅食物。但係香港人都會接受到。當然有好多人點好多豉油同 wasabi， 呢個就係另外一個故事啦。嗰個圖咧，我喺如果一陣間有時間咧，我就會再解釋一下。咁喺呢一個系統入邊，希望讓大家再明白多啲人體同埋食物嗰個關係。
I think let's give Dr. Nitya a chance also to respond to the question, and then we can come back to that.
So I had written down some points actually to share more from a theoretical perspective on your question. And I think there are many ways to approach this. And one of the two things I want to say before I get into that, one is I was listening to Dr. Chan and a lot of what he said made sense to me. So it was amazing how the approach and the ideas that he spoke of resonated with what we do with Ayurveda as well. To answer that other question you asked about the milder taste for food and the stronger for medicine, this is how I understood it. I touched upon it in our first discussion that the pungent and the bitter and astringent tastes which you get from, say, boiling decoctions from herbs are very strong. They're not tastes that you can eat on a daily basis. They're not foods that you can eat on a daily basis. However, the milder foods that we have, rice, wheat, dal, are all basically sweet, very salt, little sour, a lot milder. So they may all have the same effect on doshas in terms of balancing the doshas, but the milder foods are what we have on a daily basis, and the stronger decoctions and powders are what we have as medicine. That is the use of, that is a basic difference between food and medicine. Having said that, food is medicine and medicine is food because we are looking at substances in a very, very holistic and similar way in both systems of medicine. And to answer the question about different people, different places, is there such a thing as universal? I think one can understand this question based on how do you understand food itself. And there are three ways to approach this. One is, what are the factors related to food? So in Ayurveda, we have a specific list of 6 to 7 factors. One is combination. How do you mix foods? What happens to foods when you mix them? Second, there is a quantity of food, which Dr. Chan touched on. How much food do you eat? There's an entire chapter given to how much food you eat. And again, this is so individual. If the text says, for instance, if you eat a light to digest food, eat to your full satisfaction. If you're eating a heavy to digest food, eat only to half your satisfaction. Now, what is satisfaction? It's not measurable. Each of us know what does satisfaction mean for us. And of course, quantity is also dosage, which is the medicine aspect of drugs. But when it comes to food, it's just individual. Dosage of drugs is again, you look at age largely to give the dosage, no other real factor. But food, I think it's very individual. And I think in India itself, Ayurvedic science is pan-Indian, but the food itself is very, very different from one region to the other. But the common thing I would say is the principles of Ayurveda are integrated into the traditional foods that people eat. So the fascinating thing is that from region to region, you have even the basic oil being used as different. Coconut oil in Kerala, or mustard oil in Bengal, or sesame oil in Tamil Nadu. But the understanding of food is very cultural. It's in the way people eat from region to region. And I think this is the strength really of Ayurvedic science, that with the cultural understanding of food, one can arrive at what is a good diet for oneself. And what is the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, I forgot that one thing. But yeah, so quantity I touched on, then region, and similarly season also. It's actually, the word used in the text is kala, which is time, which can mean season also, like what foods do you eat in what season. The other understanding of time is the stage of the disease. So seasonal foods are understood in maintenance of health, and stage of the disease in curing of disease. So in both, they play a role in deciding the foods chosen. And Desha is region, which is also two things. One is, where is it grown? Therefore, how does it affect the properties of that food? And the second Desha is the person itself, the body that is consuming it. And each body is different, the constitution, the disease, the stage, the age, all of that, what it is going through at that particular time, and all of that. So the takeaway from all the various factors that the book talks about, I think, is there are two main concepts. One is hita, which is what is good. So there is a list of foods that they give. Hita ahara, what are the good foods? That's anybody can have universally. There is a list of foods. The second concept is satmya, which is what are you conditioned to? So ultimately, the book will say, go with what is suitable for you and what you are used to. And there is a small hierarchy here. If what you are used to is very, very unsuitable, very, very unhealthy, then slowly give up what you are unsuited to and slowly adopt what is good for you. That also, you don't give up. Like if something is bad for you and you've been taking it for years, don't give it up immediately, because your body is thrown out of balance when you do that. Give it up slowly, and there are ways to do that. And then you adopt what is suitable, but not what you are not used to, again slowly.
Sorry, so this implies then that there are things that are sort of across the board suitable or more suitable versus less suitable, right?
Yes, I would think that it applies to this country because it is again local to this place. So I would, yeah, so there is a list. If you want, I can give you some names from that list.
Yes, definitely. But I also think that it would be a little bit interesting to talk about. I mean, we're going into the second question, but it would be interesting to talk about it in relation to TCM. So I'll give an example. Right now, particularly, there are certain sort of superfoods or health foods that people talk about, right? So they'll say quinoa or avocado or any of these sorts of things are fads, and everybody says, oh, these are superfoods, if you eat them you will be healthy, etc. My personal experience has been that if I eat avocado in the middle of a Delhi summer, I fall sick, but like my stomach goes completely off. But the narrative is that avocados are good for you, so you should just universally eat them. And similarly, in India, generally, like not everywhere, but generally, there's an idea that milk is good for you, or milk products, particularly dahi, etc., are good for you. But we had this discussion with Dr. Chan earlier, where milk was very much one of the things that he said should not be just consumed because other people are saying it's good for you.
Sorry, I think he said that actually milk is for the calf.
He did. Yes, he did say that. So I'd like to explore that a little bit, that where these points of divergence come and what might be the reasons for them.
Also, let's if Nitya, Dr. Nitya can talk about Hitahara a little bit, then we can go to TCM and hear the reflection from Dr. Chan.
So if you look at
Nitya, sorry, I just want to add to that, to say that in an earlier discussion, the one about milk, right? I think that maybe in India, what is suited to the Indian gut, because we have been consuming milk for many hundreds of years, would be a different ability to process it and digest it than the normative, universal, Western, or even Eastern body.
correct.
So I think it goes back to the question of suitability. So in your response to Anumitra and myself, you could combine the Hitahara with the question of suitability. And how does suitability come about? It's a historical process, right? So if you could talk about that.
Correct. So let me go back into this little bit about food. So if you look at food, again, there are many chapters on food. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of the basics are about food. And there are many kinds of classifications of food. And I'd like to touch upon 3-4 aspects. One is that if you look at the philosophy, it says there are 3 pillars of life. And the first pillar is food. So that is the importance given to food. And the properties of different foods are thoroughly listed. So, and this is in terms of ingredients first. So you have different kinds of grains, rice, wheat, barley, all of that. And then there are different kinds of pulses, different kinds, all the vegetables, fruits, the different kinds of meat, even meat that you don't eat. Like, you know, there'll be properties of, you know, I don't know, tiger meat also written over. So it's not that people eat tigers, but it's understood. They have listed it. And all the different kinds of dairy. So milk is different from curd, is different from buttermilk, is different from ghee, different from butter, different, you know, each of them has a whole list of properties. So all of this is understood very well. And then there are food preparations. So different grains are made into different types of alcohol, different types of fruits are made into alcohol, and all the different alcohol properties are listed. And then what do you do to something? For instance, if you churn it, what happens? If you leave it overnight, what happens? In a mud or a copper vessel, if you leave it in 2 different vessels, what happens? So this is the detail in which food is understood. Food and its preparation, its processing, it's a combination. It is actually mind-boggling. if I mean when I start talking about it, I find it too fascinating. Actually, it is mind-boggling the kind of detail. Now, what also different kinds of dishes, like when you prepare pickles, all kinds of dishes are prepared, and all of those are understood. All of the properties are listed. So you have now a huge repository of foods and things that people make and eat, that you know the properties of and what it does to the body. And therefore, when you are, of course, you have a basic system of understanding of how to maintain health. But when you get into a disease state, what do you eat and what do you not eat? This is what it boils down to, finally. As a doctor, what is my job? I understand what is happening with the patient and I say, eat this, don't eat this. Because this will contribute to your disease, this will improve your condition. And so there is a system behind all this. So there are the details that one has to study as a doctor, but also the system, if you understand, there is a way to understand, hopefully, new foods. Like olives and olive oil are not understood. They have not been listed, the properties, because it is not local to India. But is there a way in which I can use my theory to understand this olive oil that now people are all eating and try and understand what is happening with their bodies from eating it? And the other approach is the disease approach, which is for every disease, there is what they call a pathya and an apathya. Pathya is what is suitable to the recovery of the disease. Apathya is what is going to aggravate the disease. So this I would know by heart for most common diseases, what to eat and what not to eat. But also in specific cases, I would go through the checklist each time with the patient and with my book to ensure that I have not left out anything. And what else? And then there is a whole realm of maintenance of health, which is the seasonal foods and the universal food, what you can eat on a daily basis. And of course, what you don't eat on a daily basis, and which is all very confusing now, because curd, for instance, is not in the list of daily foods at all in Ayurveda. But people are eating curd like there is no tomorrow. Now, yogurt and curd is hugely consumed. And to answer your question about these superfoods, Shalini, people are looking at food in a very reductionist way. So if they're saying this vitamin C is good for you, they're looking at foods with vitamin C. And they're saying this is good for you. But this is not how Chinese medicine or Ayurveda look at food. We are not looking at avocado or whatever and saying these are the, we are not reducing it to its whatever, vitamin, mineral, though that composition, and mapping it to what the body requires. Right? So there is no concept of a universal food that has all the components that a person needs based on that classification. Whereas there is an understanding of foods that generally don't aggravate the doshas and hence universal for everybody. And then tweaking that to each person depending on time, place, season, location, geography, all disease, all of that.
I think this second part of the answer was very close to what Dr. Chan was saying as well, that what are the factors you take into account when you figure out what kind of medicine to give to a patient or what kind of food to prescribe to the patient. Yes. So I think we could move on now because there's still quite a lot of ground to cover. And I just want to say that if we can't cover a lot of things in the next, say, 15 minutes or so, we can always carry it forward to the next conversation. So go ahead, Anumitra.
Yeah, I have one question, Nitya. I'm just trying to see that what do you talk about when it comes to Hitahara or the food which doesn't aggravate any of like all three things. all three doshas, because like some like orientation on the real, like if you can give some examples on
Yeah, so examples of a suitable, universally suitable Hitahara diet would be red rice. I'll just go through the list
Yeah.
as it says in the text. Red rice, and then there is mention of rice that matures in 60 days, and then wheat, but not the wheat that is, I think, in the market now that people are getting trouble by.
Yes.
It's obviously some, I think you people will know more about the traditional varieties of these grains than us, and you can throw some light on that. But wheat, and then something called yava, which is translated loosely as barley, but again, not what is in the market, but traditional barley.
Jowar.
Jaw.
Yeah, Yava actually, like Yava used to be very predominant in Indian context, but now we mostly get a pearl barley and then that is available in the market, but we have native barleys.
Native barley I'm able to get on Amazon, for instance. Jaw it's called.
I don't know whether that is native. We'll talk about it later in a personal conversation.
And mudga, which is green gram, that is yellow moong dal or green moong dal. Some vegetables are listed, of which one or two we are not able to identify, one or two are not very easily available, but one or two which are like radish and snake gourd and a couple of other vegetables. Couple of greens, again not very easily available anymore. A few fruits.
Like the greens?
I know only the Sanskrit word. We have to look at the Latin and then see if anybody grows it.
Okay.
It's not in the market anymore. And then a few fruits, of which a few are again available, and a couple of them are now touted as superfoods. One is pomegranate, the other is Indian gooseberry, and then
Amla. Sorry, I'm just
amla.
Translating as we go.
Grapes. So raisins actually, more than grapes, because that's available through the year. And few others that you can have in small quantities on a daily basis are ghee, some honey, some salt, not a lot of salt, and definitely not sea salt every day. So there are 5 kinds of salt mentioned in the text, of which the Himalayan rock salt is the best for daily use. Some sugar, again not the sugar in the market. I think what is called khandasari, and I think again you will have some better idea of that than me in terms of how available it is. But I've seen the original khandasari, which is an Indian cottage industry produced white sugar. And then meat. Meat is again classified into various kinds, and the 3 broad classification is meat animals that roam around in desert-like regions, and then animals that are in water, and domesticated animals. These are the 3 broad categories, of which the ones that roam around are recommended for use on a daily basis.
Oh, like the animals which roam around freely, you mean?
Freely, and also in desert areas, not in water. Like fish is not recommended on a daily basis.
Okay, but desert area.
Yeah, so for instance, okay, I don't know if I should even mention it, because now you cannot hunt and eat these things anymore, but deer and peacock and rabbits and all kinds of other animals that don't, that can survive in arid regions.
Even lamb and goat.
Goat. So if you look at goat, is given a special place because it's neither here nor there. It can survive in both, and meaning it's domesticated as well as free. And goat is also special because its meat is generally what we call satmyam. That is, people are used to it, and so now in practice, actually, when we tell the patient, we say, especially in a disease condition, that mutton is something they can have on a regular basis, which goes against the normal Western understanding of red meat and white meat. That's how they classify it. We don't look at it like that.
And what about the domesticated animals? Like they are also not consumed like all the time.
Not daily, but meat you can consume. I mean, meat is fairly it's advocated in Ayurveda. There's a lot of meat. There's a lot of discussion about meat. But again, if you're somebody, it is say, for instance, if you're somebody who exercises on a daily basis and who's very fit and you have a very strong digestion, eat whatever you want. Eat as much meat as you want. Otherwise, you eat it more in the winter season, where your digestion is stronger than the summer season.
Okay.
But goat you can eat, fat-free goat you can eat through the year because it's easy to digest. So it all boils down to digestion. How easy is it to digest and how strong is your digestion?
I just want to jump in here to say that we could maybe move towards the third part of today's discussion. And the question of digestion is clearly very central to both what Dr. Chan has been saying and Dr. Nitya has been saying. So I don't know. I know that Edible Archives want to talk about certain kinds of foods. So do you want to combine the two questions? Should we move towards discussing the centrality of digestion to whatever food it is that we are consuming? Go ahead, Anumitra.
No, I think
But
Shalini
actually, actually, I'm just glancing ahead to our next session, and it's actually going to be focused quite thoroughly on digestion only. So I think it might be a good point to sort of pause on the digestion question and let Anumitra talk a little bit about examples of food with relation to seasonality and location, like the Edible Archives approach to these sorts of things, given the time that we have.
No, I just wanted to just pose it like how we practice, because we are also trying to come to a practice and say that there is this traditional this thing called Kalaripayattu, so in which is practiced in Kerala. So
it's a kind of a martial arts. Just give a footnote for people who don't know. Yeah.
Sorry. So once I was having a detailed conversation with one of the master of Kalaripayattu, and he was talking about that we should mostly focus that most of our food should come from like where you are situated, where you are located. If the food is coming from, most of the food you are consuming is coming from that place where you are getting this like the Panchabhuta, the 5 elements which the body is consuming. If your food is also coming from that same region where the same kind of sunlight, the same kind of water and other elements that is also nourishing your body, is also nourishing or growing the food from there. So that is a very important thing, and we are going very far from this like because we never know where our food is coming from. So I generally in Edible Archives we try to practice this, and I would like to I'll give some examples, and I want to hear from you like from the doctors, so that we are in the right direction, or because it's a practice. And even when like the conversation that we are doing, we are also trying to tell people that how to also put it in their own practice, because we are otherwise going very far from our everyday food. And so we try to do this, that we absolutely don't use any kind of processed food, because we really don't know the source of the processed food, because the processed food mostly grown without thinking of any balance, and like the additives and preservatives which goes into it, we really have no idea where it is coming from. Like one of the examples I'll give you, that like besan, which is chickpea flour, which used to be very common in Indian food for many things. Like in North India, it's said that if you have chickpea flour in some kind of a curry kind of a thing, that also gives you some kind of like it gives little bit of warmth to your body and all these things. So that was like, it's also part of everyday thing. But you know, while we were also, we do our research around food, and we figured out that most of the chickpea flour is coming from like one of our friends who actually told us, Dr. Vikram doctor, who told us that most of the chickpea flour is actually, it's a yellow pea flour which is now imported from Canada, and that is actually flooded in Indian market. So the kind of work we try to do is just go deep into things and try to see that where the ingredient is coming from.
Yeah.
Shalini, you want to
Sorry,
say
I just want to clarify that. So therefore, that means that the basin that we get in the market is not at all chickpea flour. It may be called basin, but it's actually yellow pea flour. And one, we don't know what are the properties of yellow peas as opposed to what are the properties of chickpeas. Secondly, it's grown in Canada. So it's grown in a completely dramatically different climate. Thirdly, we again, in terms of balance, we don't know what are the conditions, how much fertilizer, how much irrigation, other types of additives, preservatives, right from the point at which it is grown to the point at which it is milled to the point at which it is shipped. So given all of this confusion, we've decided just to not use basin at all at Edible Archives unless we are making it like
yeah. So we actually work with farmers who are growing it, and then we get it ourselves and mill it ourselves. This is like this is the kind of practice we are trying to do. So getting deep into, it's not yet really like this is not absolutely like, if you know that okay, this is good for you, these are the elements, but the market is so much contaminated right now that it is very difficult. Even you know, oil, like a mustard oil, you buy it like it's 230 rupees a liter from the market, but when you buy good mustard, it's 180 rupees a kg, and from 4 kg mustard you get 1 liter of mustard oil. So is it possible to get that? Like, so we try to get into this kind of detail about each ingredients and follow it through, and then try to put it in the practice. So it's a very like it's a very heavy back end heavy kind of work, but as we learn more, it makes like, you know, you learn that just knowing about like what you should eat and what you should not is not enough. You have to really get into the detail. That's why we wanted to tell about this particular kind of practice, and so that we like also you can understand and say also, we want to tell this to our viewers, that you know, just not to take things for granted as it comes in the market, are like they are full with labeling, advertising and all that. But when we actually think about, because we are talking about food, let's get little deeper into all the elements also. So like, yeah, that's what we wanted to say. Also, like, we practice something which is, we call it ingredient driven. So when we are sure of some ingredients, we take that up and then we work with that, and that then like, it can be, you know, from Indian food, it can be a method we are using, like a Japanese food technique or something. But since we are like sure of the ingredient, we go with that. So I also think that that is another way of doing that, like to practice this. Like, if you know that these are the food you should eat or you should consume for your body and everything, and go with that kind of a line, and not think that these are superfoods, these are that's like how I understand and how we practice it.
I'd like Dr. Chan to respond. I don't know if he followed this particular line of thinking, but I remember from my time taking medicine from him that he'd always tell me, well, consume this kind of rice. He's even given me some kinds of rice before. And Dr. Chan, what Nitya was talking about earlier is Hong Mai, the red rice. I think that I've often eaten it in Hong Kong. So, and I remember you also telling me that when I source tea or rice or certain things, that I should be careful to know where it is coming from. In an intensely globalized place like Hong Kong and many other Indian cities as well today, we never know where things are coming from. I think this is the point that Anumitra is making as well. So if you could talk about the importance in TCM of knowing where the ingredients are coming from.
頭先個內容非常豐富，亦都涉及咗第三同第四個部分嘅討論。我一部分係follow 唔到啦，咁但係中間我就 send 咗兩個 graph 就俾阿 Kelvin。第一個 graph 咧係關於，麻煩你 Kelvin 你一路整緊。第一個 graph 係關於天地人三個字。咁呢三個字咧都係非常重要，亦都好概括咁樣解釋咗全部嘅嘢。天咧就係我哋講時間最主要，即係天時。地就係講頭先講嘅地道食材啊。人就係我哋第一部分即係討論嘅，人嘅體質需要食啲乜嘢。正常嘅咧用呢三個原則咧，其實就去制定即係有關好食物嘅準則嘅。但我非常高興咧，Dr. Nithya 咧頭先即係喺討論當中講咗一個其餘即係兩個非常非常重要嘅 missing piece。嗰個咧亦都係個珍寶嚟嘅，直頭係個珠寶，即係喺我哋個討論裏面應該係最重要嘅一樣嘢。呢個咧就係右邊個圈同埋左邊個圈。右邊個圈咧就容易啲理解嘅，就係叫天然嘅食物。天然嘅食物包括即係頭先講嘅所有，佢係本地種嘅啦，又或者係合乎嗰個食物或者嗰個動物嘅生存環境，即係去種植嘅。佢係食緊一啲啱自己食嘅飼料啊，或者飲好嘅水啊，去生長嘅一啲食物。以下咧就有太多嘅例子咯。咁我 send 咗幾個出去，譬如嗰個保加利亞南牛啦，譬如豬魚小麥啦，其中一個就係攞咗諾貝爾獎嘅，就都係過度改變咗嗰個種植速度。咁另外就雞啦，同埋其他肉啦，用激素啊咁樣，好多好多例子。左邊嘅圓圈咧，我希望大家如果有希望咧，就進入一個更深層啲嘅討論。右下角咧嗰個字咧引起我非常大嘅興趣啊 ，satisfaction。呢個係Dr. Nithya 提起嘅，咁就好回應到中醫咧有一個好重要嘅 concept 叫做神。我哋討論嘅嘢咧就即係傾向喺一個世界物質嘅層面咯，但係中醫嘅陰陽五行就係需要有一個神同埋氣同埋精去貫通嘅。所以呢三個字好重要，所以希望Kelvin 會揾到一個合適啲嘅即係翻譯。但係我哋首先講一講佢嗰個內容先。有個好有趣嘅例子，即係譬如話我哋大家都知發酵嘅食物咧，儲製嘅食物佢會致癌啦，燒烤嘅食物係致癌啦。中醫亦都講即係唔好食生冷嘢，但係韓國啦、美國嘅德州啦，同埋日本成個國家咧，都冇因為食呢啲食物咧而死晒。一個好重要嘅一個原因咧，就係因為佢哋個地方同埋習慣，更加重要咧就係佢嗰種即係對傳統食物嗰種滿足。所以呢個神咧係中醫最抽象，但係最豐富、最有個人化，亦都最有動態嘅一個名詞。所以我 我唔知道答到即係之前幾多嗰個問題啦。咁但係我好希望咧，大家會用一個即係如果喺中醫嘅角度，就用一個充滿好奇心啦，同埋對食物同埋對生活好有熱情，同埋一副即係可以穿越時空嘅眼鏡啊，再去睇深啲呢個問題，再去討論，繼續去討論食物嘅問題。咁最尾嗰個圖咧 ，Kevin 唔該，就係我做咗一個少少嘅總結。咁點樣去有一個 rules 咧，去利用個五行圖，點樣去揀一個食物啱食嘅食物？第一個咧就係進一步了解嗰個五行啦，例如利用嗰個圖。第二就係將需要分辨嘅食物咧，做簡單嘅分類。第三咧就係考慮即係現在嘅狀態，包括佢哋嘅化學性啊，同埋即係各樣其他嘅情況。即係舉例就係牛或者牛奶咧，原本我哋講係冇毒嘅，但係因為而家飼養嘅問題啊，咁佢變咗好有激素啊，有毒啊咁。譬如以前嘅鹹咧，我哋即係喺古代嘅諗法，佢淨係代表鹽啦，但係而家已經唔係啦，即係喺現代就係講緊味精。咁我經過前嗰3點，我就可以利用翻嗰個五行嘅圖表，按住需要我包括四季啊、時間啊，咁再去用。最尾咧就係決定嗰個劑量，即係俾嗰個 subject 去食嘅劑量，咁就完成。就希望答到即係Taju同大家嘅問題。
Nithya, would you like to go ahead?
Clarify something. He gave 2 examples for things that have changed because of the way they're produced. One is milk and the other is
Beef, I think.
beef.
No, and salt also.
Pardon me?
Salt, like
Salt,
salt.
I understood, yeah.
Yeah,
Salt.
yeah.
No,
仲有一個
salt
咧
is-
叫
yeah, the salt I think he meant was as the way it's used in cooking, whereas
Mhm.
beef and milk are actual ingredients. That was the
Yeah,
difference.
yeah.
Sorry, Dr. Chan, you're going to say something.
仲有一個係叫做侏儒小麥啊，侏儒小麥喺90年代攞咗諾貝爾和平獎嘅嗰個發明者，係因為佢解決咗嗰個全世界嘅糧食嘅問題，但係後尾就發覺好多即係潛在問題出現，都相信同佢有關。
I have one question to Dr. Chang. If like the way Nithya also, Dr. Nithya also discussed about some things which, according to Ayurveda, which is like universal. So if from TCM we we also would like to hear that what are like some things that TCM considers to be consumed, universally it's good.
頭先我聽到就 superfood 啦，係咪 ？superfood 其實喺我個臨床係製造咗好多問題嘅都。So superfood is not that super to me。另外一個咧就係寒熱嘅問題啊。譬如喺香港病人嘅情況咧，好多時所謂嘅超級食物咧都係比較寒涼嘅。咁譬如話五青，即係蔬菜汁啊呢一類，咁我哋見尤其是好多女性咧，長時間去用呢啲咧，佢會造成即係腸道啊，嗰個婦科啊，甚至肺嘅問題。如果講翻另外一邊咧，我哋譬如本地嘅大學啊，或者科學家做咗好多相對嘅研究，譬如係杞子啦、五味子啦、蜜糖啦。咁呢啲都係即係我哋相信係中國人嘅 superfood， 係啊，佢都喺嗰個上品嗰個 list 入邊嘅。但係我哋喺臨床上面咧，其實都要因為病人個情況個需要而去提議佢食唔食呢啲食物。所以我恐怕我真係俾唔到一個好實在嘅叫做全能食物。又或者係對所有人健康都好嘅食物嗰個名單，但係有一個情況咧，又可以俾大家睇到就係每個人都會根據佢個屋企 嘅習慣去食嘢嘅，所以其實個思想嘅方向應該可以調轉。而我哋人咧，人類係可以被環境去塑造我哋所需要嘅食物，係一個互動嘅。但係如果要完成呢個 project，我哋一定要喺呢個塑造過程咧，保持譬如對五行嘅認識啦，同埋對嗰個精氣神，尤其是神嗰方面嗰種了解，跟住再加落天地人三個部分。呢個肯定係一個大嘅挑戰，因為我哋係一路同自然做緊一個互動，甚至係對抗，去揾緊一個新嘅平衡點。
I think this is an amazing conclusion to today's discussion. And it echoes so much of what Dr. Nitya was also saying. I wonder if we could conclude now, because I know everyone is pressed for time, especially Dr. Chan. So let me ask Dr. Nitya to do a final response before we end for the day.
Would you like anything specific or?
Maybe go over this question, because I think it's actually been touched upon throughout. One was the question of, are there universal foods? Are there foods suitable for all bodies? And you had given a list from the ancient texts that said these are suitable. And Dr. Chan had said milder foods are better because they're not, don't have the taste of medicine, etc. So you've ranged over a number of questions. Yes. About, are there universal foods? What's the question of suitability? To which, in response to you, Dr. Chan brought up the question of the suitability is also connected to how the individual thinks about it and the element of the spiritual as well. So just a very broad response without any touching on any specific question to conclude today's discussion.
I think that from what we discussed and from what Dr. Chan said, I think food is essential to healing. And it's essential to balance and it's essential to healing. And without looking at where the food we eat comes from, I mean, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine give us a framework in which to understand food. Now, food has also changed over the years, over the centuries. And I was fascinated to hear that about that basin. Because again, we don't use it very often, but it's used a little bit here and there. We make some pakoda or something, we put basin in it. But to think that it is made of something completely different than what we know and we understand, I think draws our attention to the fact that all kinds of things are going into our body on a daily basis, and to become aware of what is going in and how it is affecting us. And hopefully as human beings, I think we shouldn't, I think doctors are here to help us understand a lot of things, but also to move forward in terms of how do we understand as a society, as individuals, what we eat and how it affects us. I think this really should be the movement forward and why we're having these discussions in a sense. And I'd like to also add one more point about this universal foods that Ayurveda talks about. It also, so there are specifics like food and properties and universal foods and foods that are bad for you, which are again all conditional. I mean, again, this can change. Milk is considered something that you can have on a daily basis. But again, what milk? How is it produced? And who is drinking that milk? In somebody with heart disease, we say stop milk straight away. So there are so many ifs and buts to this universal list. And the second thing is the approach to how food is cooked and eaten. The processing that Dr. Chan was talking about, where Ayurveda says that essentially food that we eat on a daily basis should have three qualities. One is it should be slightly oily or fatty. It should not be totally dry, like these salads, very raw vegetables with no fat in them. The second quality is it should be light to digest, which is again a very individual thing in terms of what is easy and what is difficult to digest for each person. But there is a way to universal understanding about what is it. Like milk, for instance, boiled with and diluted may be light to digest, a pinch of dry ginger added to it is lighter to digest, whereas cooked and reduced and made into kheer is very heavy to digest. So processing is a huge, plays a big role here. The third is that it should be warm in temperature, that it should not be cold. So, again, quantity, again, locality. I mean, we can go over the whole thing again, but I think we've gone over the ground, and I'm left with the question of, with all these things that affect the food that we eat, how does one figure out what is suitable for one's own body?
I think this is a good point to stop because, as Shalini mentioned, next time we'll be focusing more on the question of digestion when we meet again in January. And I think that we can relate these issues of what kind of food to eat to what kind can be digested by individuals and by cultures also.
我想提一個好有趣嘅問題，就係 what if， 即係如果我哋成個討論都係講緊係最好嘅食物啦。假如呢個世界係冇最好嘅食物，又點樣呢？有機會咧，呢一個最好或者超級食物咧，係一個廣告嚟嘅。我哋試想想係我哋話叫做家的味道。我哋食一啲未必係咁好味嘅食物，但係我哋得到巨大嘅滿足。所以深入去睇咧，呢個有機會係一個再深入睇到一個中國嗰個文化咧，就係只有平衡而冇解決問題。因為 superfood 咧，即係個超級食物係我哋成日都睇到一個解決問題嘅意思喺上邊。有咩食物可以解決晒所有健康問題，令到所有人健康？但係如果係中醫就只有平衡，同埋只有對天地嗰種尊重，同埋自己對生活嗰種專注。呢個就係我想提嘅問題啦。
It's an even better conclusion than what we imagined, and I know that people have to leave. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Nitya, Dr. Chan, and I'm delighted that we could all come together again for this conversation. We will have 2 more conversations in January. We'll be in touch to find better times than what we have now, but there is still, 1 more month. We can figure out what is more suitable for everyone in the discussion. But thank you for a very, very rich discussion. As always, we look forward to taking this into the next year. Bye-bye all.